Good morning, Nigeria. How are you? One of these days, one of my favorite shows around the world is Good Morning Vietnam with Bill Crystal. And one of these days, I'm going to say Good Morning Vietnam. Well, I should say Good Morning Nigeria, not Vietnam. But anyway, well, good morning. We have a lot to talk about today. It's always a pleasure to be here. We have a very interesting show today. We're going to talk about, of course, the United States, the presidential election there. We're going to talk about the United Kingdom and all the craziness that's going on there, and tie all this together about why it should matter to Nigerians. But first, I want to talk a couple of quick seconds on a few things. Just a few updates on things. The world is just constantly changing. France, luckily, has a new prime minister, which I think will kind of stabilize some things there. We'll be doing a show on that here in the future. In the United States, one thing that, is really, I don't know if you guys are following it, but you really should take a look at the new arrests in the United States about Russian and Chinese interference in the U.S. elections. I mean, it's just amazing, the interesting and amazing stuff that they're doing these days to try to influence U.S. elections. And I only bring that up because, as we've talked about before when Ben Murray Bruce was on the show, is that, Russian interference there in Nigeria. And I have zero doubt that they will start to play in Nigeria, especially as you get closer to the presidential election there. So their influence we should talk more about. We will in the future. And well, the other thing is, listen, I love being on TV. Okay, who doesn't love being on TV? And by the way, I should send my congratulations to Miss Universe Nigeria because I saw her on the show last week and I didn't get a chance to say congratulations, but congratulations to her. But anyway, if I was not a person on TV, I would be a treasure hunter because I have to tell you this. In the United States, somebody just found in a file cabinet stuck in the back of an office a copy of the U.S. Constitution, 247 years old. Just found it stuck in a file cabinet. And now that's going to be sold for millions and millions and millions of dollars. So for all of you in Nigeria, make sure you go through your file cabinets. I wish it really should be around the world with Tim Montgomerie because I'm very honored today to have Tim here. Tim, anybody who knows anything about UK politics, if you come to the UK, you're going to see Tim on the TV. He's always talking and pontificating and giving his words of wisdom, I should say, about what's happening in America's best friend or special friend, which, you know what, I think, we'll talk about this in the next segment, but I really think we need to get past this phrase of special friend. I don't know. I mean, it's just kind of weird in today's society we talk about special friends. Anyway, Tim, welcome to the show. Great to have you.
It's a real pleasure to be with you, Dane. Thank you for having me on.
So, today we're going to talk, we all saw what happened to, the Tories and, Labor kind of, won overwhelmingly and a lot's been happening, but kind of bring us up to speed about where is the state of affairs and politics in the UK these days? What's going on with Keir Starmer and the Tories, and give us kind of a feel about where things stand.
Well, we're about 2 months into the new Labour government, Dane. It's an unusual period in Britain because we just had a summer holiday, supposedly, but that summer has been characterised with quite a difficult first sort of period in government for Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister. There have been some riots on the streets of Britain, partly racially motivated, protests about immigration, the level of immigration into Britain, which is a controversy that really is spilling over the whole of Europe at the moment. And then also the government have taken some, or at least announced, some pretty controversial decisions on how they're going to spend and tax. And one of the things that they have announced is they're withdrawing a special winter fuel allowance from British pensioners, which helps them heat their homes in the cold British winters. And that's really caused quite a negative political reaction. So some governments, new governments, they have a honeymoon. I think this government's honeymoon lasted about a fortnight. And after really, in the election, they had about 20% opinion poll leads over the party I support, the Conservative Party. But the latest opinion polls show that all of that lead is more or less gone. And so politics is always hard, but in these days I think it's even harder, and Labour certainly are on the back foot at the moment.
So, around the world, and this is happening next door in Ghana, where they're having a presidential election and the ruling party's been in power for 12 years. The Tories were in power for 14 years, and there's always this discussion about it's the other person's time or opportunity. In 14 years, I'm just going to put you on the spot here, since you're a conservative. In 14 years, what did the Tories do? I mean, were they successful? Do you think it was time for them to change, or what really was the motivation for the voters to make that change?
Well, it's a very good question. I'm 54 now, Dane, and my sort of first sort of formative experience of Conservative government was from 1979 to 1997 with the governments of Margaret Thatcher and John Major. And we could spend the rest of your programme, our time together, Dane, talking about the achievements of that period of Conservative government. In terms of the achievements of the last period of Conservative government, to answer your question, we probably only need about 2 minutes, if that. Brexit was achieved in some people's minds, the exit from the European Union. That was quite controversial for a lot of people, but that was the big achievement. There were some school reforms, some welfare reforms, but overall we wasted our time in government, and this links up to the answer to this, your second question. We wasted our time in government because of a lot of internal squabbling. I don't think people really knew what conservatism was anymore. We become a party of careerists, a party of people who were in power for the wrong reasons, and we governed very badly. So personally, I don't think Britain deserved a Labour government. I don't believe in the Labour philosophy, but we as a party certainly didn't deserve to stay in power. We had governed very badly.
Okay, well, so what are the Conservatives doing to fix that? I mean, is there a plan in place to try to fix those mistakes and resurrect, like be the phoenix and resurrect from the ashes?
Yeah. Well, we're in the middle of a leadership election at the moment. There were 6 candidates. One was eliminated last week in a vote between Conservative MPs. There's another vote today, which will bring the number of contenders down to 4. And ideally, of course, the leadership contest wouldn't just be a personality contest about who looks the best kind of celebrity, who has the sparkle, the stardust to lead the Conservative opposition. It would be a fundamental inquiry into those things that we were just talking about, Dane, talking about the failure of the Conservative Party to govern properly, responsibly, competently, or as Conservatives. I'm not entirely convinced that we've had quite that sort of level of intellectual post-mortem that we need yet, but the contest actually goes on until early November. We don't announce our new Conservative leader. I think it's the day before your presidential election in the United States. So there's still plenty of time for the candidates to undertake that proper post-mortem or to carry on just being a personality contest. We'll see which of the two it is.
Let's talk about immigration for a second, because I remember watching some of the debates there. Immigration is a huge issue. It's a huge issue. There's a lot about African immigrants coming in into Europe and into the UK, and as we all know, there are a lot of Nigerians, a huge Nigerian diaspora in the UK. As far as immigration, we had Nigel Farage talking about how whatever Nigel wants to talk about as far as closing the borders and doing things like that. But what's up with immigration? Is there going to be a fundamental difference between what the Tories believed in and what the Labour believes in? And how does Nicholas Farage or Nigel Farage fit into all this?
Well, can I say first of all a thank you to Nigeria, because not all immigration is good, but I sometimes think Nigeria and Africa is coming back to Britain to re-evangelize my country. My parents go to an Anglican church in Weybridge, and their pastor, up until recently, he's just moved on to other things, was a Nigerian pastor. Wonderful preacher. The church really increased in size, a really lovely man. And Tom Tugendhat, one of the leadership candidates for the Conservative Party crown, he has a Nigerian minister, I think, in his Catholic church. So, first of all, immigration is a very good thing in so many respects, not just for the revitalization of a church and a Christianity that I believe in, but in the health service and a lot of specialist skills. What I think the problem is, though, is that it's on a scale at the moment that the British people never consented to. I think you can take a certain number of people into your country and it not overwhelm the housing provision, the public services. And there has to be an extent to which you come to a country like Britain or whatever, and you want to go to that country for what it largely is, And I think some of the immigration into Britain in recent years, particularly from some Muslim populations, is more that they come not to integrate, but almost to change Britain. And I think that's where the controversy lies. People are very welcome in this country if they stand up to our values, they learn to speak English, etc. But I think the general opposition that we're seeing in lots of European countries, lots of countries all over the world, is to the scale of the immigration and an unwillingness or an incapacity to integrate.
Well, okay, so what does that mean? I mean, do you see any fundamental changes? Like I know that the Tories had what they call the Rwanda scheme, where they were actually going to put Rwandans on a plane and ship them back to Rwanda. Not just Rwandans, but is something like that going to happen? So if you see this, I mean, listen, the reality is there's a mass immigration or exodus of Nigerians around the world. I mean, and we won't get into the whole issues about why that is, but that's the reality. Going up through Libya, crossing over into Greece and Italy, and then coming up through, France. And so do you see that the Labor Party is going to be harder on immigration? Do you see that, if you're Nigerian, should you be concerned about your ability to come to the UK?
I I think it will become stricter. I think it's not just Britain. In the last 24 hours, Dane, Germany has instituted some very strict border controls internal to the European Union, and that now is expected across most of the European continent. So, rightly or wrongly, we can debate that. I think Europe will be a harder continent for people from outside of Europe to get into, and Britain won't be an exception. Labour, the new Labour government under Keir Starmer, is certainly talking a tough game on immigration. I'm personally not convinced by the individual measures they say will secure Britain's borders, but time will tell.
Hmm. And do you think, I just noticed that the UK, this is kind of a curveball for you there, I think, but, the UK Foreign Office just issued their updated list of countries not to travel to, and, what they call their red list. And Nigeria actually was on the red list. Do you have any idea why that is and what's going on there?
I don't know why a specific change has been made. I don't, but I think there is a general concern in Britain at some of the sectarian violence that does take place in Nigeria between Muslim and Christian populations. But as you say, it was a curveball question, and I'm not sure of the specific issue that may have caused a change in the status on that red list.
I appreciate that. Well, one last question before we take our break, and then the next segment, you're going to have to brace yourself because we're going to talk about U.S. politics and that special relationship.
I probably should be asking you the questions then, Dane, rather than the other way around.
I know nothing. What do I know? But listen, just so why do you think, just one quick question here, why should Nigerians care about what's going on in the UK? Seriously, why? And this is part of the show. Like, we try to tell people the global, what's happening around the world matters. If you had to, you're talking to all these Nigerians now, why should they care?
Well, that's up to them, I suppose. But what I would say, I'm a Brit. I'm a patriotic Brit, so I'm always going to talk up my country. I think perhaps first of all, there's the traditional three reasons. First of all, we have the traditional links between our two countries. We have an awful lot of culture and history in common, some of it better than others. The second thing is, I would say, Britain, although it's a much smaller and less powerful country than it was, actually on a cultural level is still something of a superpower. British television, music, arts, sport. I'm very proud that Britain was second in the Paralympics, for example, was just taking place in Paris. Fifth, I think, overall in the medal table in the the first sort of round of Olympics. So those sort of culturally, and then thirdly, security and global policy. We're a member of NATO. We're a nuclear power. We're a good friend of your country, the United States. We're on the United Nations Security Council. So we are a relatively small country, but I think we box, above our weight, really, in global affairs.
Listen, I spent a lot of time in the UK, and whenever I get to the UK, it's always a pleasure to talk to Tim and really find out what's going on. Because, you have certain political pundits around the world who can talk about the big stuff, but you know what? Tim actually has his little spies out there around the country, so he always knows what's going on. So definitely a lot more than I do. Okay, Tim, we're going to talk about that U.S.-UK special relationship. Let me ask you this. Do you think that the U.S. and the UK have a special relationship?
I do. I think Britain regards it as more special than America. um, and also I think there's a pattern, Dane. New presidents come in and they sort of feel that they're going to move on from Britain, and they think they're going to reorientate themselves to Asia or to other European countries. But when troubles arise, usually sort of involving a trouble spot in the other parts of the world, there's one country more than any other that America can rely on for some kind of military alliance, for intelligence support, for diplomatic knowledge, for a gateway into Europe, or for a relationship, for example, with Commonwealth allies. Britain again and again, not always uncritical, but Britain again and again is that reliable friend of America. I hope a candid friend, but a reliable friend. And in the conflict at the moment that's taking place, terrible conflict between Israel and Gaza, when it was Iran threatening to bomb Iran, it was British forces and American forces that combined together to shoot a lot of those attacks down. Just one small example, but I think we could go through every recent presidency and find examples of British and American cooperation. And the Iraq War was a very controversial one. I'm not saying they are all good alliances, but the alliances have existed. And so I don't think there is another country that America has partnered with so regularly and reliably than the United Kingdom. So yes, I do think it's a special relationship, perhaps not as special as it once was, but yeah, I think it's an enduring one at the very least. Perhaps, Dane, we could agree on that word, an enduring relationship.
I think that's much better than special relationship, enduring. And I hope it endures, because you look back at the Thatcher Reagan era. I think that fundamentally around the world, that relationship, that key relationship, did more to stabilize and grow democracy and freedom around the world than any other relationship that I can think of in my lifetime. But speaking of the U.S. presidential, as you know, we have our presidential election coming up. President Biden decided to step aside. By the way, he claims he's Irish. I don't know, is that true or not? Who knows? But one of the reasons they claimed that his relationship with the UK wasn't as strong as it was. But do you think it's going to make a difference to the UK who the next president is, whether it's Kamala who takes the reign, or if it's Trump again?
Well, I often think I'm going to be a little bit rude about your country's politics now, Dane, so you can tell me off if I am. But if you just looked at American politics, you'd think America was a very dysfunctional country. Biden's age.
I'm not going to disagree with that. I'm not going to disagree with that statement. So,
but of course, America is a hugely successful country, almost despite its dysfunctional politics. You look at its economic strength, its technological innovation, its cultural impact. I sometimes ask myself, how can the world's most stupid country, which is how some people think of America wrongly, be richer, cleverer, more culturally impact than any other country in the world? And that, of course, is the contradiction. It isn't a stupid country at all. It is by far the most important country in the world. And so the answer to your question, in my view, is very much based on that. Britain's relationship with America is so much deeper than anything to do with whether the president and the prime minister get on. The economic links between our country in terms of investment are huge, and trade. We have so much military and technological and intelligence cooperation. We travel constantly to each other's country. You to mine, Dane, me to yours. We watch each other's television and films. The British-America relationship, like with many other countries, but particularly this one, will survive whether it's Bush and Blair together, Thatcher, Reagan, Sunak and Biden, Harris and Starmer, whoever it is. We will continue to get along. And I think even when the Prime Minister and President are of different political colours, they get that. We are two countries bound by history, culture, technology, and economic interest to continue to be very close.
I agree with that, and I appreciate that. But you just said Harris Starmer. Is that like a kind of a faux pas, like a Freudian slip? Did you think Harris is going to win? I mean, who do you think?
Well,
Based, what do you think is going to happen? Just what's your prediction?
I think Trump's going to win. Um, and I think this is a difference between us, Dane, is I hope Trump will win as well. I have all, I think, of your reservations about Donald Trump's character. He is not someone I would want particularly to spend a great deal of time with. Well, actually, probably would be quite good fun company for a little while, but I certainly wouldn't trust him as a friend. But the reason why I'm a conservative, the reason why I'd be a Republican in your country is on fundamental issues like the level of immigration, uncontrolled immigration across the southern border with Mexico, the rise of crime in Democrat controlled cities like San Francisco, the influence of transgender education in schools, the level of tax burden, the power of teacher unions, etc., etc. I'm a conservative, and I think, despite Trump's character defects, it's better to have a conservative or a Republican in the White House than a Democrat. And Kamala Harris does seem to me to be a particularly weak Democrat candidate, but it's more those fundamental values and policy issues that lead me to support Trump, which is a position that's unusual in my own party, let alone in Britain, but it's nonetheless one I hold to.
Yeah, I respect that. You can't be perfect all the time there, Tim. But tonight, so the Nigerians understand this. That tonight is the big debate, the first debate between Harris and Trump. It's going to be very interesting. From the people I'm talking to, you're going to see a real tell. I mean, listen, Harris has kind of had a honeymoon, a true honeymoon. I mean, she just happened to be thrown on the international stage. Her policies aren't really known. I mean, there's a lot of concern, even among me, to be honest with you. I am a little concerned about the extremism of some of her policies. But those should come out.
Even
Listen,
you, then. Even you.
Even me. Listen, I don't want a communist as president. I'm not saying she is, but I don't want a communist or a socialist as president of the United States. But that's one thing. Listen, so I think tonight, just to talk real quick about the debate, I think that there's an opportunity for Trump. Listen, Trump is, for a guy who does political campaigns around the world, Trump is in many ways the worst because he never stays focused. He never talks about issues. He always makes it personal attacks, and it's just, and so the American public is hungry for like what you really stand for. So tonight, Kamala, it's the first time that she's going to be having to really articulate what she believes in. And you're going to have Trump there who, if he does what he should do and focuses on how, the economy and how the economy grew under his presidency, I think it's one of the best opportunities Trump has to end her honeymoon. Now we'll see. But when it comes to debates themselves, I mean, you're in this world of politics. I mean, do you think that debates themselves are important for the public to really understand?
Not normally, but of course we just did have that debate between Biden and Trump that effectively ended Biden's time as president, or certainly his opportunity to have a second term. He performed so spectacularly badly that it changed the weather in a way a few other things could. People could see before their eyes his age. Normally, I don't think debates matter quite so much as people like us like to get excited about, Dane. But because of what you said, Kamala Harris didn't go through the primary process in a way that a normal candidate would. So she's largely untested. Although she's been vice president of America for the last 4 years, people don't know her anywhere near as well as Trump. So this debate might matter if she performs incredibly well or incredibly badly. I don't think Trump can do anything to change the perceptions people have about him. He's a very known quality. But can Kamala Harris show that she's up to the job? And I think the eyes will be very rare when you have Donald Trump on the television screen. I think the eyes of America and the world will probably be much more on her because of that unknown quality she represents than him tonight. But I was interested in you say the first debate. I wonder if it will be the only debate between these two, because I think I'm right in saying they haven't agreed another one yet.
No, they haven't. I mean, they've actually gone outside the normal. There's a whole presidential debate organization that handles this. They've gone outside of that. This is the first presidential election in, I don't know, probably 20 years, 30 years that hasn't followed the official line on how presidential debate should be handled. My gut is, listen, if Donald Trump does great, he'll win another one. If he does so-so, he's not. But there's no plan for a second one. There will be a vice presidential debate, which I think will be interesting between Waltz and JD Vance, especially when it comes to their military records. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, listen, I think that one thing that Kamala has, I mean, she's raised almost $850 million since she's been the nominee, and that is an astronomical amount of money that is going. And Trump is nowhere near that amount of money. Even if he tries to self-fund, it'll be a very difficult thing. Well, listen, sadly, we have run out of time today, Tim. It really is great seeing you. It's always a great pleasure. To Nigeria, thanks again for having the show on. Next week, we're going to be talking with some individuals about the debate, post-debate, so we know more about the perceptions of where Kamala did well or Trump did well. But anyway, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Around the World with Dane Waters. We'll see you next Tuesday at 9:15.